Welcome to another special episode of Better Business, Better Life, where myself, Nick and Jeni Clift are talking about what the heck is EOS and some of the common questions that are actually asked about EOS by our clients or people who are considering adopting EOS into their practice. We actually recorded this as a whole podcast episode, and we've broken it down to two pieces to make it easier to digest. So if you're keen to listen to part one, then please go back to last week and have a look for part one, and this is part two, continuing on that journey.
So I'm going to ask some questions around when I'm talking to potential clients. So one of the things that I get sometimes is, okay, so we're really keen on signing up and doing this EOS thing, but we're going to wait until X happens. So have you ever had that, and whether that's, we've got a bunch of projects on, so we just want to get these done or whatever it may be. But have you had that question, and what's your response been?
Nick?
Yeah, I haven't, to be honest, I haven't really had a lot of that challenge because the way I've been approaching it when a client asks a little bit of a question about EOS, I'm pretty good at explaining the benefits that have happened to us, and it's like you don't need to have things. You don't go and cut your hair and go to the makeup artist before you employ someone to do your hair and makeup for a wedding, for example. Or you don't go and mow your lawn before you get the lawnmower guy to come in. And I just have a whole bunch of analogies like that. And I say, well, why do you think you need to complete all these projects and recruit an extra person on the leadership team? And, we've got a problem with Bill over in accounts. We need to fix him up before we could start this process. I said, well, that's one way of doing it, but we could start the whole process together. And I can guarantee you we will touch on all of those things and we'll solve all those issues on the journey through, and you'll bring everyone on the same page, on the same journey, and you end up with a hugely better result. So I probably don't let people use that as an excuse, to be honest with you.
And I love your analogies, actually. That's really cool, talking about, not mowing the grass before or cleaning your house before the house cleaner comes, right? Someone I can certainly relate to. Yeah. And to answer your question, Jeni, I think that I always ask the question, so what's going to happen when that thing happens? Like, what's going to be different? And, sometimes I get a bit cheeky and I go, so how's it working for you at the moment? Because if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're going to get the same results. So why don't we try something a little bit different? Because I know that the tools and the framework we have will actually give you a real opportunity, as Nick said, to kind of pull all these minds together and actually help solve these issues potentially quicker than you would do if you're trying to do it on your own. So yeah, what's holding you back? What would be the difference if you did solve that first?
All the answers are generally in the room already. Like most businesses have very smart people in the business, and sometimes they just don't have an environment or a platform to express themselves and have and in a safe, supportive way. And once you create that environment with your leadership team or any team in the business through the process of saying we're here to deal about a business issue, nothing personal. Everybody's voice is equal. There's no hierarchy in these meetings. Once you're in the meeting, you're all treated equals. And I start all my sessions with saying it's actually a privilege to be here. The owners of this business entrusted the future of the company to you guys in this room. So it's a privilege to be here. Don't waste the time here, and your input is required and is valued. So just don't hold back, and nothing you say will be ever held against you in the room. And there's some interesting things come out of that. And and that's as us as implementers are able to go to places where potentially a line manager couldn't go because they've got the history with the person or they've got to sit next to them tomorrow. Whereas I don't. I'm only there once a quarter, and I can be the bad guy. That's no problem. Always with the best intentions for the company, obviously, and caring for the people.
I call it poking the bear, but I do sort of preface that by saying, I love poking the bear, but I actually do it from a place of love. I do it from a place where I actually want to make sure that the poor old bear's not doing itself any disservice. And I think you touched on a really interesting point there. So, when you're in any team meeting, the leadership team or the sales team meeting, you are all absolutely equal. And sometimes the answers to these things come from the most unusual places. So, I remember working with a client where they had a real major cash flow issue. And normally you kind of go, well, that's for the finance person to deal with or whatever. And in actual fact, it was the chef in the business who kind of came up with a solution.
Wow.
Because once we'd really identified what the real issue was, we went around and discussed it. And this person who generally kind of cooks food sort of went, well, how about we try this? It was like, okay, genius. So, it's nice to have the power of other people helping you solve your problems.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And somebody who's not in the weeds, who's got that sort of, but potentially still in the business, but a bit of a, sort of, a step back from what's going on, can come up with some great ideas.
Yeah. So what do you say, Jeni, when you get asked that?
Probably something along the lines of, I do like Nick's analogies around, or as you said, Debra, you don't clean the house before the housekeeper or house cleaner comes.
Yep.
But I think it more around, so how long have you had, X in the business? 20 years. Well, are you going to wait another 20 years?
Yep.
So that's how I handle it. But it is one that I do get sometimes of, we just need to get through this phase. Okay. And the one business in particular that I had this conversation with, same industry as Nick and I have been in, and 25 years that had the same issue going on for 25 years. So, well, I'm hoping to not still be working in another 25 years, but perhaps we don't need to wait quite that long.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Perfect.
And the other question, I don't know if I've actually had this question, but it's certainly a topic that I hear in our community as implementers, is when people say, why would I pay for an implementer? I can buy the book, I can self-implement, but why would I go and pay for somebody to do this? So if you have had that question, or if you did get that question, what would your response be?
Yeah, well, I have had that question, and my answer is always the same. It's like, it's like people that drive fancy cars. I call fancy car, but I call a practical car, like an Audi or versus a Hyundai or a Daihatsu or something. Getting from A to B is a journey. You can choose to take an uncomfortable, difficult journey with lots of stops, or you can get in a business class flight and go there quickly. And that's what I think the whole EOS methodology is. There's nothing magic about it. There's nothing that you couldn't do yourself. There's no magical tool that's hasn't been taught in other business schools over the years, but it's the combination and this rigor of doing it regularly and having that accountability is the number one thing. And from my own experience, holding yourself and your life partner, business partner, co-worker, manager, children in your business accountable is very difficult to hold them accountable. Whereas an external implementer can be that accountability partner. We're not there every day of the week, but definitely once a quarter we're there, and we're absolutely shining the spotlight on every single part of it. So there's that's kind of the major advantage I see of an implementer. Plus the experience that we bring. Debra's got years of running other businesses. We've run our own businesses for 30 years. It depends what you're looking for, and that's probably how you go through the process of choosing an implementer. We all deliver the EOS methodology and tools and the education the same way, but it's our unique experiences and how you relate to people that can add super value to your team. That's for sure.
Yeah. And personalities as well. I mean, you've got to actually, I think the relationship with an implementer is a really important one. They've got to feel comfortable working with you and vice versa. But I use analogy myself on this one. I always say it's like having a personal trainer versus just signing up to a gym.
Yeah.
So, you can sign up to a gym and you can go along, and sometimes you might do the exercises. Sometimes you kind of go, I'm feeling a little bit lazy today, I won't bother. Or you have a personal trainer who's actually there alongside you. And with my personal trainer, she's not only there alongside me and pushing me when I don't want to do it, even when I've had a couple of glasses of wine the night before, but she's also then got an app as well, and she's actually keeping track of things for me and making me track my food intake and my exercise and everything else. And so it's kind of like putting it on steroids. It's actually you're still going to get to the end goal, but you're going to get there a whole lot quicker because I need someone to actually hold me accountable. But also, more importantly, she doesn't get tied up in all the stuff. If you're doing it within your own business, and you absolutely can, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you have relationships in there with people that can sometimes just make it a little bit hard to call out the elephant in the room or to poke the bear or to, so it's like actually having somebody external. They've got a little bit more permission to be a little more cheeky about asking the questions. And I always say, we don't tell people what to do. We never do, with the dumb person at the front with the marker, but we are external, and therefore we can ask the right questions. And like Nick said, based on your experiences, I've worked with about 500 companies over my coaching career, and 10 or 20 in my actual business career. And so I don't have the answers, but I know the right questions to ask, which will help you come up with the answers.
Yeah, and there's definitely a theory that you can't work on a system if you're part of that system. So like facilitating a full day strategy session, if you are a senior executive in that business and you're the facilitator of the day, it means you're not participating in the thinking part and contributing to the actual strategy. So that to me is probably the number one thing. And the feedback I get from the clients I work with, that just the external facilitation on the day, aside from all the tools and stuff, that stuff is gold. But the whole, as we support our clients on the way through the whole journey, I think it really does add up. And even for me, I can't even take notes in a meeting. If I'm taking notes, I'm tuned out. I'm not contributing to that meeting at all.
Yeah,
that's just me. Some people, we have one of Jeni and my fellow EO Melbourne members is an absolute machine. He can generate like 30 pages of notes from a 1 hour meeting and still contribute and listen. So I don't know how the hell he does it, but he just he's like one of those unicorns, but that's not me.
He's one in a million. He's absolutely one in a million.
I'm very digital. It's either going in or it's coming out. I can't do both at the same time.
And we won't mention anything about that male, generalization of, you can't walk and talk, will we, Nick?
No, because our note-taking friend absolutely can do both at the same time.
I think, a couple of other things. So, Nick, one thing you mentioned there was a good segue for my next question, which is, as an implementer, what's your best or favourite comment or feedback that you've had from a client?
Oh, yeah, I love this one. So this was a client that I'd met through association, and we had a meeting and we decided to progress together, and they'd been working with us, another external strategy coach for 5 years. So I was very confident of EOS was the right thing for them and where they were in their journey. But it was a little bit of bit of nervousness about, hey, I'm the new guy coming in to take this leadership team on a journey when they've had another guy, and he happened to be in the session as well. So the previous strategy guy. So I was kind of thinking, and anyway, cut to the chase. At the end of the day, the CEO came to me and said, mate, that was amazing. I did not see that discussion, and this was about the accountability chart and the key roles in the business. He said, I did not see that going in that direction, and different people were in different roles where they were in the morning session that started the day. And he said, that was amazing, and everyone was crystal clear on it and knew exactly what they needed to do for the next period. I go, yep. I said, that's what it's all about. And just that crystallization of, at lunchtime, it was complete confusion. There was upset people, there were grumpy people, there were people not like, hang on, my job is on the line and this kind of stuff. And then after lunch, they came back and it all crystallized. They go, man, this makes so much sense, and everyone was happy. So that's probably the best feedback I've ever had after a session. I really appreciate it. And and they're rolling with it. And they've had a couple of changes in the leadership team since then, but they've definitely got the right people on the right path now.
Great, Debra.
So mine was, I actually got feedback from a client that said they got more clarity in one day with me than they had in 17 years of business. And to me, that was just like, that's what we do it for, right? Because when you have those light bulb moments, it's just great. And I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've got a lot of feedback from clients about the things that they actually achieve, but that to me was just the one that nailed it for me.
Nice. Yeah, for me, I have a client who's one of their sort of operations or client services manager was really quite sort of non-committal, very much in that, I don't think we need this. It's a great place to work. We all love the owner. We're doing okay. Do we need something like this? And in the next session, I think she rated our first day together maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10. It was kind of like, it's sort of in that 7, which is kind of okay. And in our next session, she, maybe 10 minutes into the session, she said, oh, Jeni, can I rate the day now? It's a 10. Because how much I think we needed this. Which has become an ongoing joke of, she's always like, I was the number one fan. I thought that we absolutely needed to do this, which is just this ongoing sort of in-joke. And her one of her expectations for the day was that she would learn something. And within the first 10 minutes, she had learned something. So she was, we'd started at 9, and by 9:15, she'd rated it a 10. And it's really nice to have sort of been part of that turnaround. And it is a great business. They're doing really great things, and made a few, as you said, Nick, made a few changes on the leadership team that have been for absolutely what the business needed. But she's now one of my biggest sort of fans, and always referring people to me. And but that ongoing joke of I was the one who thought we needed this. I was all in, has just become sort of our private joke, if you like.
Excellent. And you brought up a really valid point there. I think the fact that every single meeting we run in EOS is actually rated is really, it was a bit of an eye-opener for me because, I've worked in council for 18 months of my sins, and we'd have meetings for meetings sake, and nothing ever got done, and we all just kind of had nice little cut sandwiches and little mince pies. It was all beautiful. But the fact that we rate every single meeting, including the weekly meetings, the quarterly meetings, all of those, it's all about actually recognizing what's working, what's not working, and looking to improve each time. So even when you get your 7s, it's like, well, what can we do better? And I really enjoy that, not only for my clients' meetings, but when we actually meet with our clients, the fact they rate how we work together on that day is great feedback for us all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. Nick, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. One that comes up a lot, and it's kind of at the start of the journey, is who should come to the focus day, which is our first major day. And traditionally, it's about building the leadership team, but the challenge is you don't want to have too many people there, but you also don't want to leave people out that can contribute. So that's kind of questions I've had. So I'd be interested to hear how you guys have handled that question.
So I'm going to be really honest, in the beginning, not so well. So my first 2 focus days, I actually had 10 and 11 people in the room.
Wow.
Because there was one was there was a whole bunch of shareholders, and the other one was they were actually all part of a senior leadership team in the existing company. And so I thought they actually had to be there because they're shareholders, they need to be involved in the setting of the strategy for the business, etc. And with the second one, it's like, well, we've got 11 people who think they're on the leadership team, so we probably should work out whether they should or shouldn't be. My recommendation now is to say, hey, look, this is going to be really, really confronting. I would much rather that you think about the people you expect to be on the leadership team, usually 4 to 8 at most in the leadership team, that will be in that room. If there's anybody you think might not be, I'd much rather not have them come to that session. And maybe somebody who didn't come to that session come into the leadership team later, than have them in there sort of disrupting the day and feeling bad about what's going on. So, redefine what leadership team actually means. It's not senior management team. This is not the senior leadership team from a title perspective, but it's who are the people who will absolutely need to be involved in taking this business forward, or that lead the main functions of the business, and just bring those people in. Learned my lesson. Had some big fights in those focus day sessions, which I do not want to repeat.
Touch wood, I haven't had any big drives on the focus day. I had some interesting ones, but not.
Yeah, me too. Actually, there's not much I haven't seen in a focus. We've had people, and I say this, sharing this just because I think people need to understand it is a bit confronting. We have had tears. We've had one person who completely refused to engage at all. We've had people who've got almost into sort of fisticuff fights and things. And as you said, that's the first part of the day, and then by the end of the day, it's all turned around. Everybody kind of is on the same page, understand what's happening. But I think it's important to note that it's almost like you have to break a few eggs to make an omelette, and so the focus day is really about breaking those eggs.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I very much along the lines of what you said, Deborah. I haven't had. I've had those conversations where should we bring everybody? No. You either don't invite them if you think that they're not going to be on the leadership team, or if you do and they're not, then you're going to be the one to have that conversation to say you're not on the leadership team. Often that will sort of stop people from putting out the open invitation, everybody come in. So I always sort of do the less is more. The ideal number of that 4 to 8. Closer to 4 is better, and really the people that you think will end up being part of that sort of key leadership team are the ones that need to be there, because other people can be brought up to speed. If you have a new member of the team join, we can bring them up to speed far more efficiently than having a big room of people who are really just don't need to be there in the first place.
Cool. Cool. My next question would be who should be, or what role should be the integrator? And is that a dedicated role, or is that Is that an existing person on the team? That's a question that comes up a lot. Generally prior to the session, but I had that question quite a few times. Interested to see how you handled that one.
This is actually a really interesting one for me because people often say, oh, EOS is just a framework and it's a cookie cutter. It's the same for everybody. And yet in my experience of all the clients I've worked with, it so is not. So even though the framework is the same, there was just so many different variations within those organizations. And so I've got some companies who have, chosen to bring in an outside integrator. And often it's not necessarily a full-time role. So we have this kind of vision of a GM or a COO being a full-time role, and so therefore the integrator must be a full-time role. But I had one company where they had 140 staff based around New Zealand, and they had a part-time integrator who literally did 1 day a week managing the leadership team and the special projects. And so it wasn't a full-time role. It doesn't have to be. I had another company who actually employed somebody externally to come in and do the integrator and the operations role, because the two combined kind of made up a full-time role, and it sort of made sense to do that. And then I've got other companies who actually just employ external fractional integrators, which is somebody who just comes in for a portion, 1 or 2 days, to actually do it. So I've had everything from people being, elevated up into that role once they prove they GWC it, to people existing kind of wearing 2 hats, to having fractional integrators.
Cool. And Jen, what about you?
Yeah, I sat in the integrator role in our business effectively for about 10 years, prior to EOS, and then probably the first 2 years we're running under EOS, I sat in that role. And for me, I don't think it was ever a full-time role as integrator, but I sort of took on the sort of the admin side of the business as well, not so much finance. We had a fractional CFO. And my clients now, they're probably sort of sitting in that the integrator, one client is visionary integrator, and the other's more sort of integrator and operations. So not full-time roles. To me, you'd need to be a decent-sized business to have a full-time dedicated integrator. Most of them sort of have a secondary role as well.
Yeah, and that's what I've experienced. Typically, if the company still exists of the originating founders, one of those ends up kind of in the visionary seat, and one kind of ends up in the integrator seat, because that's how business starts. You've got to have someone with the ideas and then someone who can execute. It makes perfect sense. But as the leadership teams grow and move, it can be a sales manager who has the integrator seat as well. It can be don't typically see finance managers having the integrator seat, to be honest. Are more operational or project-based, COO type roles. But it's just an interesting question that does pop up, and we kind of the thing I love about the EOS process is the team decides themselves in that session about the accountability chart. And if no one jumps out as the obvious choice, then that's when it becomes a vacancy, and we go and recruit. We either get a fractional integrator to come in, or someone to come and teach someone to bring them up to speed. So I totally agree with what you guys are saying. Cool.
And I think there's something I'd like to add to that as well. I think people see this integrator role as being sort of, get a little bit of an ego thing, like, oh, look, I'm running the whole company. But they've got to understand it's also one of the most challenging roles, because they've got to have the tough conversations with all of the leadership team. They've got to keep that visionary in the visionary box and make sure they're not, messing around, middling in the day-to-day business operations. They've got to have the tough conversations with the visionary as well, and sometimes challenge them for these ideas that the visionary is absolutely hooked on and thinks is the best thing since sliced bread. Nobody mentioned robots here. And and actually have the conversation to kind of go, is this really a good idea? And be quite sort of staunch and quite firm with that, while not cutting things off and not, not sort of subduing the enthusiasm of that team. So it's not actually an easy job, I don't think, and keeping meetings running on time and that sort of stuff. It's a pretty challenging job.
I've had one of my clients we've been working together for 12 months, and I think we're on the 3rd person in the integrator seat. Initially a couple of goes was out of obligation. I've been here for a long time. I can see that if I don't be the integrator, I won't have a seat on the leadership team. So kind of they put their hand up, and we all said, okay, there was no other better option. But you have to trust the system. It pans out. And over the next 2 quarters, that person rang me as the area employee and said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not the right person for the job. So when we do our next quarterly, let's put that as an issue we need to resolve as a leadership team. That's perfectly fine. It's quite common to happen as well. Yeah, cool.
I think the integrator, it's more about the capacity or the sort of natural tendencies of the person in that seat. It needs to be somebody who's quite organised, who is willing to have those conversations, difficult conversations. Somebody who can sort of multitask, take on different projects, and keep everybody, on track. And traditionally, a true visionary doesn't perform in that role because none of those things come easily to a visionary. So it can actually be more detrimental. I was, as I mentioned earlier, I was integrator in our business for a long time. And when we started the EOS process, I put my hand up for the role of integrator and said, yes, I get it. Yes, I want it. Yes, I had the capacity. And one of our team called me out and said, bullshit. You don't want that role. And I had to admit that he was right. Probably a little bit of sort of fear of, if I don't do this, what do I do? A bit of obligation. And, that everybody will expect me to do that. So that person actually stepped into that role in that meeting, but it became really clear very quickly that he just wasn't quite there yet. He just didn't have some of the skills. So I actually stepped back into that role with a plan, I think a 1-year plan to upskill him and fill those gaps and then hand that role back over to him. And he, the Monday, next Monday was the day that he was stepping into that role. And on the Friday, he came to me and he was in an absolute state. He could barely string words together to form a sentence. And finally figured out that he was having a bit of a panic attack because Monday was the day that he was stepping into that role. And he was just like, oh my God, what have I signed up for here? So we pulled out the checklist and we went through and said, have we done this? Yes, we have. Have we done this? Yes. So we went through the list. All of it was yeses. And he said, okay, good-o. Well, I'll see you Monday then. And off he went. So sort of it just, again, that EOS, that process, that checklist, the plan just allowed for that transition. I finished up on the Friday as integrator and he came in on Monday as the integrator and it was all handed over and it just worked. Yeah. But for me, stepping into the role as integrator, for me, it was absolutely obligation. I felt like that was the role that I was meant to be in. But whether it was fear, whether it was ego, I don't know. But it worked itself out.
Definitely.
Yeah. Actually, it's one of the things I actually love about that whole accountability chart building as well, because it's the only methodology that I have seen where we design the structure and then we actually ask people what role they want. And, because they've always been in XYZ role, that's like, well, that's the role I've always been in. We're going, no, which one do you really, really want? And they get to put their hands up. And sometimes it doesn't work out. They're not the best person for the role. They don't generally sit. But you've now got an understanding of where people's, where their passions lie, where they want to go. And it means you can actually do that whole development plan like you just talked about. You can go, okay, so you're not quite ready to be an integrator yet, or not quite ready to be the sales division leader yet, but we can now work on that, knowing that's what you want to do. Let's find out what the gaps are, help you fill them, and then that can be your future career pathway.
One of my early clients was 3 brothers in a business, and then another, and they were all leadership team, and another 2 on the leadership team. And in our first session, first or maybe the second session, one of them said, I actually don't want to do this. I don't like leading people. I don't like having to come into the office and do all of these meetings. I just want to go and sell stuff. So he went from sales manager leadership team and he was not performing. But he'd been in that role for, from memory, 7 or 8 years and caused no end of frustration to himself and everybody else. So he left at the end of that day not on the leadership team, and everybody was so much happier, including him. But nobody had ever actually asked him, did he want to do it, which was a no. And I don't think he'd even really asked himself. It was just sort of, it had just kind of happened and evolved into him being in that role. And everybody thrived.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. You must have some stories too, Nick.
No, completely. Because I had the perfect integrator in our business.
Oh, of course. Silly me.
Well, no, the transition from Jeni to our other general manager was one of the aha moments for us, and one of the key things that we were on leave somewhere, and we said to each other, this has actually worked. We have actually achieved our number one goal, which was to build a leadership team, employee-led company, and where we can go on a holiday and not have to worry about the business because we've got all that stuff in place. We know the processes are happening. We know the level 10 meetings are happening. We've got people accountable for different roles. So that was a really good process to go through. And like Jeni said, it took a couple of goes to get it right, but we nailed it in the end. That's probably the only other one I would add to that is one of our.
Well, Nick, before you go on with that, we're in the situation prior to EOS of not being able to take more than a week of leave. Right. Because we're both working in that business, and that was Wednesday to Wednesday. So we were there Monday, Tuesday this week. We had a week off, and then next week we were back Thursday, Friday. And we'd been doing that for years. And that holiday that Nick was talking about, we were away for 5 weeks. I think we got 2 phone calls. And when we came back to the office, everybody kind of went, "Oh, you're back." And it was like, well, if you don't need us, actually, they don't need us. This is fantastic. So part of it was sort of like, oh my God, they don't need us. But yeah, it was what we wanted. We'd finally been able to achieve what we wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So one example of that kind of transition from roles to roles was I was the visionary, plus I was also the sales manager, business development, and one of our sales team said that he wanted my job. Oh, interesting. Yeah, nice. So it just happened to be my son, one of my sons. And he said, well, that's good to know. Thanks for your feedback. So we kind of did it. And then I think the next quarterly session brought it up again.
What was his actual feedback?
Well, initially he wanted it. And then the next quarterly session, he said I was doing a shit job as a sales manager. And we had an external sales coach at that time, and she pretty much agreed. But then I think 2 other people in the meeting said, yeah, you're right. So the GWC, I didn't want it, and I didn't want it. I didn't want to be the sales manager anymore. I did it out of obligation, as a lot of people do.
And that particular session, that second one, we had a new member of the sales team who'd been with the business less than a month. It was week 3 maybe, and all of this is going on around him in this session. We're running a sales team quarterly, and our son said to Nick, you're a shit sales manager, you're doing a shit job. And there's sort of this bit of sort of talk about our sales coach agreed, and this new guy was literally sliding under the table. I think he thinking, oh, this is going to get very ugly. There's sort of this little face peering up over the desk saying, oh, okay, well, there's no fisticuffs, everything's okay. And he said to me afterwards, that was pretty wild.
But once again, we all agreed that yes, I didn't want it, but at that particular time, the other guy didn't have the capacity to do it. So we set a place in plan, and within 6 months he got that role. And I stepped out of the sales manager role and just as an account manager, which is what I love doing, going out and seeing clients. So yeah, it's a real powerful tool.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing that the whole capacity to do it. So when we do this in the beginning, people think capacity means time capacity, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it? How do you describe capacity?
To me, the capacity is you have the skills and knowledge to do the job in a reasonable time frame. So there's obviously going to be people that are faster and quicker, and people that are slower, but there's nothing external you need to be able to fulfill that role in the business. That means you have the capacity. Can you get better at it? 100% you can get better at it. Then you might have more capacity and you can take on some other things. But yeah, you generally, getting it means that's when you wake up in the morning, man, I love doing this. This is what I know what the job is. I really get it and I want it. This is going to help me achieve my goals of what I want to get in life and where the company's going. And that capacity is, I know how to do the job. I've got all the technical skills and I've got the ability. yeah, I might struggle at sometimes to get it done faster than the other guy, but generally that's okay. And from my perspective, the capacity is the only thing we negotiate on. If you don't have a tick in get it and tick in want it, there's no chance you can have that job. It just will not work for the company. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, agree.
And I guess I start with the get it. And to me, get it is you were born with a natural affinity for this role. So if it's finance, you have a natural affinity for numbers. You just, you wake up in the morning excited about going and doing numbery stuff.
Yeah.
And capacity is
I guess that's not your forte.
It's definitely not my forte.
Numbery stuff.
No.
If you want
Numbers
to
is
test
not my
that
thing.
theory, you need to watch the show called 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown.
Oh, I love it.
And if you like me, I naturally get the numbers game. I get that numbers game right probably more often than I get it wrong. The word one, I'm completely useless at. So you can tell pretty quickly. There's some things you can do to tell. Well, are you naturally naturally aligned with numbers or with letters? So I'm definitely a numbers guy.
Where letters is mine. Yeah.
Letters is mine too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And to me, so get it is natural affinity. You were born with, that in your DNA. And capacity is everything that you've done since then. It's your education, it's your qualifications, it's your experience to add to that natural affinity.
That's a good way to put it.
No, I completely agree. And the same with Nick, what Nick said, it is about that knowledge, skills, experience, but it is about being able to do it in a reasonable time frame. So it doesn't mean you have to be an absolute genius or you have to be an absolute expert at it. There's always room for improvement, but you have to be able to do it in a reasonable time frame we would expect, not spend, 10 hours doing a very basic invoice in accounting, for example.
Yeah, and the main thing, the GWC for me is that I don't want to see a team of people where a role's assigned to an individual who doesn't really want it. They're doing it out of obligation. Oh, well, I've been a sales guy here for the last 10 years, so yeah, I should be the sales leader. Yeah, well, our great friend Jack Daly, he hit me between the eyes with a brick at that last session I went to. And his big number one thing is a sales manager should never, ever have a sales target. And that was my failure. Because throughout my entire history as a sales manager, I always had the biggest sales target as well. So naturally, I'm going to do my deals and close those ones before I have time to help the other team members close their deals. And that's not what that's a manager, not a leader. Like if you want to lead a sales team, you need to not have a sales target at all, and you're totally focused on helping the people in that team achieve their targets. And that was a real, a really good consolidation of what I've learned in practical experience. But if you had told me that 10 years ago, I would have had a completely different result, I reckon.
Yeah. And I loved what he said too about, and don't take your best salesperson and make them the sales manager, because you want them in the team selling stuff. And it's funny, when I think back through our journey, that's exactly what we did. And at the time I kind of knew, like, why are we doing this? But never kind of took the time to think about why are we actually doing this, because it's sort of a natural thing. This person's really great at sales, so we'll make them the sales manager so they can lead the team. No.
So true. Yeah.
So I've got another question that comes up a bit for me, and I'd love to get your insights on this one. And it's to do with the to-dos versus the issues and where the things sit when they're in between a rock and a to-do. And, because my experience with the clients and my experience with myself, we end up with this massive long to-do list. And then the issues list, there seems to be for some reason, some desire to close all the issues out every meeting and generate a big load of to-dos. And what I'm trying to find out is how have you helped people understand that it's kind of the reverse of that in my theory, that the issues list should be the big list of all the problems. And then the to-dos, what you've committed to do in the next 7 days to solve those problems. So how have you guys found that, and what's worked to get them on the right track?
Yeah, similar to what you were saying, is that I actually think the issues list, it doesn't matter if your issues list is long. It should be. It's kind of a holding, it's like a parking lot for the things that are going on. And so you might take an issue and you might discuss it and you might solve it, and that would become a to do, but may not have solved the entire issue. It's just the first step in solving that issue. And so put that to do on the to-do list, and the issue kind of stays on the list because there's still a phase 2 or a phase 3 or whatever that comes from it. And people get nervous, but we've got 72 issues on our to-do on our issues list. That's okay. And in fact, it can be, as long as we're actually taking the time to go through them and go, what are the most important ones? And we're discussing the most important ones. And every once in a while, cleaning up that list to go, actually, is this still relevant? It's a great holding place for all of that stuff that needs to be held somewhere.
No, thanks. I agree.
Yeah, I do that. We did the same thing in our business, and I guess sort of teach the same thing with clients, is leave it on the issues list. So if something's an issue and somebody's on leave, for example, just put a date on it so that, when that person's back from leave, it's the 1st of February, then we'll tackle that one. But don't put it to do for somebody and date it in February when they're back, or put it to do in them that then, just sits there and becomes stale. Leave it on the issues list.
Yeah. And it comes down to, because, we expect them to do 90% of those to-dos in the 7 days. So the whole thing of less is more again, right? You actually want to have the major issues. Sometimes it might be 1 or 2 or 3 that get, solved in a meeting. And then that should lead to 1 or 2 or 3 to-dos. So you can come back next week and go, yes, nailed it.
Done.
Yeah. And I had the same question about rocks. Sometimes people say, well, what happens if we finish all of our rocks? And it's like, awesome, you can do some more work. It doesn't mean you have to stop.
Do more rocks. That's the other thing with rocks, is just because we set a due date of the next quarterly doesn't mean you can't finish it early. Like, in fact, it's because as soon as this is obviously one of the highest priority challenges for the business. We've all decided as a team, so getting it done quicker is going to bring more benefit to the business. Don't wait till the last week. Don't do what we used to do in high school when we had an exam or an assignment due. Leave it all to the last weekend to get it all done. No, we want to do it right now. Start at the beginning. Yeah.
To be fair, that worked for me throughout university, but probably not a great strategy in business.
Business, not so much. No.
Because you're right. The sooner you get it done, the sooner you actually are rewarded with the benefits of doing it.
Yeah. I love the description one of the other EOS implementers I heard give recently, that you have your 12 weeks or 13 weeks to get your rock done. So for the first 10 weeks in each leadership meeting or L10 meeting, you say, it's on track, and then week 11 you say, while crying, does anybody remember what this rock was? Because I haven't actually started it yet, and now I can't remember what it was. And by week 12, you're off on stress leave, and week 13 you're MIA. So on track is not, I haven't started it yet and I can't remember what it was. So making sure as integrator that you're actually really holding people accountable and getting those regular updates. Where are you up to? And but also one thing we learned early on in our journey running our business on EOS is the wording around rocks is so critical, and don't bite off more than you can chew. So we would put things like research, implement a new tool for whatever, and everybody using the new tool in 13 weeks.
Yeah.
Impossible. So we learned, because we'd researched it, we'd decided which one we were using, and we'd started the implementation process. But we certainly hadn't finished the implementation, and nobody was using it yet. So rock not done. Where if we'd researched, made the rock as research and decide what tool we're going to use, and perhaps, implementation plan or something along those lines, you can achieve that. And if you do your research and pick something really quickly and roll it out in the quarter, that's even better. But make sure that you actually have those rocks worded in a way that is achievable in that 3-month time frame, because you still have your job to do.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. I mean, if you think about working on the business versus working in the business, they say that it's the whole 80-20 rule again. You should be spending 20% of the time working on the business, which is the rocks, the important stuff, and the other stuff is sort of working in the business. So that's actually 1 day a week that you should be working on those rocks. So that could be 2 half days, that could be a full day, but you actually need to put time aside, because otherwise, when are you actually going to do these rocks? They're just going to get, you're going to get consumed with the day-to-day stuff and not actually get it done. I also think that it's important that you in order to not lose sight of the rocks, it's okay to ask in a level 10 meeting. I just want to try thought. In a level 10 meeting, it's okay to kind of go, hey, Jeni, I know that you keep saying that rock is on track, but I would like to get an update on that. And you drop that down to the issues list, and it becomes one of the issues on the issues list. And then you may get round to it if it's one of the most important things, and you may not do. But it is okay. I'm not saying I don't trust you, but I'm saying I'd like to get an update just so we can have a bit of a sense as to how you're going with that. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm actually working with one of Nick's EOS clients at the moment in a fractional integrator sort of a role. And I was working with one of their leadership team yesterday because she has a couple of rocks, and she just wasn't sure, I guess, sort of how to start the ball rolling, because they're things that fall into her team. And she has accountability to get them done, but she's going to use team members to actually do them and I guess do the legwork. So we went through, this is the rock. What does done look like? And then work backwards from there. What are the major steps? So then she can start allocating. Create a project effectively out of that and use one of their other tools, to have those project steps. So, and then she's got the major steps, that she can tick off those milestones, and, just really sort of dig down and say, well, how am I actually going to get this done? And, bite-sized chunks. Rather than looking at it saying, overwhelmed, don't know where to start, I'm going to go and, I don't know, get a massage. And I'll look at it tomorrow. Yeah.
That's cool.
Cool.
So the only other kind of share I'd like to hear from everyone is I get a lot of questions about, should we be preparing for the level 10 meetings before we get to them, or do we just rock up and do all the work in the meeting? So that's kind of a question I get sometimes. And just be interested to see if you've come across that one before and had any advice or any suggestions on how to maximize or the effectiveness of these level 10 meetings.
So I don't know if this is EOS pure or not, but I actually think it is quite important to kind of prepare for those meetings. And I'll never forget, and I won't say what client it was, but I sat through a client level 10 meeting, as we do, to help them on that journey. And this person who was in charge of finance, the first issue he wanted to deal with was the budgets for the year when we got to the issues. And he spent about 45 minutes walking us through this massive, great big long spreadsheet. And I just thought, wow, we've just spent 45 minutes just even getting to to understand what this spreadsheet is. What was the outcome you really needed from that? And of course, when we're observing, we can't jump in. We just sit back and we listen, we see what goes on. But I said to them, imagine if you'd actually circulated that report beforehand. So this is a report I'm going to present at the meeting, and the outcome that I'm going to need from it is, your approval or any concerns that you might have from it. And then you could actually raise that as an issue. Now, that means you're preempting that issue will get discussed, but one would assume it was pretty important if it's the financials for the year. So it's pretty likely it will get discussed. And I just think that sometimes by thinking about, what can I possibly circulate beforehand, or what can I have thought about beforehand, so I'm not going in there winging it's great when we're really good at it, but it's not necessarily the best result for the organization.
Yeah.
And I take note of issues in the middle of the night when I wake up. And so for me, I've got my own personal issues list that for the business that I will actually write down and bring into the level 10 meetings when I come in as well.
Jen?
And I use two things. One, I guess I teach as part of the implementation process. The leadership team meeting is your most expensive meeting. The 90 minutes that you have your whole leadership team, if you work it out on an hourly rate for those people in there, over 90 minutes a week for X amount of weeks per year, it's a really expensive meeting. So you need to make the best use of that time, because you're making a big investment in that 90 minutes. And the other thing, I actually, Nick, use your insistence from our time running on EOS in that when we came to the issues list, Nick flatly refused to discuss an issue that had a heading, some vague heading with no detail, and in the software
like
tool
sales
that we used to run
managers,
it.
not good.
But I don't know. Issue with X. It's like, what the hell does that mean? And there's no detail, there's no thought. The person who's raised it, who's entered it in the software, can't even remember what it was. Nick would just flatly refuse to discuss it. So making sure that people, and also the other thing that we insisted on was you have to be able to articulate what the issue is in 2 sentences or less. So you had to actually know what the issue was, have thought about it, and raise it in a way that it could be discussed at that leadership team and come up with a solution, rather than some vague thought or nothing. X person on the leadership team hasn't raised an issue in months. So does that mean that your team is running absolutely 100% perfectly with no issues? Yeah, I don't think so. So again, integrator comes in and has a conversation with that person and says, what's going on here? And because in our business, after a couple of years of running on EOS, we had everybody in the business ran a level 10. So our finance team, our service teams, everybody in the business was involved in an L10, and some only a couple of people, so there might have been 30 minutes through to 90 minutes. And we were using one of the software tools that would push issues from one meeting to another one. So the sales team had a discussion about an issue, felt that they didn't know the solution or didn't have the authority to make a decision about something, so they could push it to the leadership team. We could have a discussion at our meeting and then push that back to them with a solution, a way forward, and just making really good use of the methodology and the system, and then everybody knew what was going on. They had sort of that documented record of, yes, we've got approval to go ahead and do this.
Yeah, and for me, it's the way I've seen it be most effective is that people have updated their to-dos before the meeting. They've got all the issues that they want to discuss. Scorecards will be updated all their issues into the system, and they bring their top 3 issues in their head already. Because when I sit in the integrated seat or I'm running one of those meetings, if no one's got any ideas, I just pick my own 3. And in a healthy team, what you'll get is people will be competing to get their issue dealt with. And that's what I want to see. I want to see people competing to get their issues dealt with, because they know, we got a level 10, whether it's a leadership one or it's a departmental meeting. You've got the people in that meeting that can make a decision. And if that issue is holding you back from achieving your ROC, or a client issue or a staff issue, you need to fight to get it done. So my only advice for anyone out there is just come to those meetings prepared. Make sure your to-dos are up to date, your issues are in the system, and you know which issues you want to put on the table first, and don't hold back. Like, I would be very quick at saying, number X, Y, I want these 3 things dealt with first. Anyway, that's good. That's cool.
Cool. Well, as you can see, between the 3 of us, we have years of experience and lots of examples of working with clients that we can share. And we're very passionate about doing this because, we want to help people actually lead a better life through creating a better business. So I'm really thrilled to have had the time to share some of these things with you. Thank you, Jeni and Nick, for joining us. Can't wait to see you hosting some of these podcast episodes in the future. We'll look forward to running more sessions like this.
Thanks a lot, Deb.
Very excited to be here. Thank you, and absolutely looking forward to bringing you some other guests through and being part of it.
Thanks, Debra. It's been great and a good start to 2023.
So thank you for joining us today on Better Business, Better Life. We have really enjoyed answering these questions for you around EOS and what EOS is. We're now going to do another series where we get Jeni, Nick and myself back all together in the room, and we're actually going to answer questions around the recession. What do we see coming in 2023? Will there be a recession? If there is, how do you prepare for it? And particularly lots of tips and tools around how we've seen businesses not only get through a recession but come out on the other side thriving. So that will be our next series. If you've got any questions you'd like to have answered, just drop us a line. There's plenty of ways to get in contact with us. Get us the questions to us, and we'll make sure we answer them in the next session. Thank you.